It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 92. It's a link to The Sound of Music, a homage to it, sort of. Rob will explain what's coming up next, but Rob, before we get going, let's make sure you're here. Are you here?
I am here, thank you. So you went Sound of Music. I was thinking Oprah. I believe it's her who does this list every year and blows things up and decides the agenda for the year ahead. Ours is going to be like that, but less influential, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll try. We'll see how we get on.
Yeah, so let's stop dancing around it. If you hadn't guessed already, this episode is our favourite things of 2014. All our favourite books, websites, apps, you name it. Lots of great things that we've discovered and used throughout the year. So if you're on the lookout for a cheeky extra Christmas present or just a little extra gift to yourself, this is the podcast for you. Not a lot that directly applies to property in this one, but lots of bits that you can take to make your property business more effective and enjoyable.
And let's face it, everyone loves our Resource of the Week section, which hardly ever has anything to do with property. So this is like a bumper Christmas special for you all. But before we get going, a couple of things. First up, a reminder about our January meetup, which is the 4th of January, which will be at King's Cross. If you go to thepropertyhub.net/meetup, you can select a ticket there. We are limiting the numbers just because we don't want it to be a sweat fest like it was last time. We absolutely ran the room last time, so we're just limiting it for that reason. If there are tickets left and you fancy joining us on Sunday the 4th of January, the evening, 5:30 till 7:30, then go to thepropertyhub.net/meetup and we would love to kick off the year in property style with you. Rob and I will be there, probably with about 100 other people, so it should be a great event. So hopefully we'll see you in January if you can make it. It'll be in King's Cross, London area. The details are on that website link. I won't give you the address here. If you want a ticket and you want to see exactly where it is, go to the link we mentioned.
Yeah, it'll be a great way to start the year. A year that promises a lot. We're going to be talking more about what's coming up next year in a future podcast. But for now, let's talk about a bit more podcasty goodness that's coming your way. The Property Geek podcast, which a lot of people have been asking me about, has been on hiatus for longer than I'd like to admit and longer than I'd planned for one reason or another. It's coming back next year. The Property Geek podcast will be back in January. And if you want to take a little look at Property Geek itself, the website's had a little bit of a refresh. It looks a bit nicer now, a little bit cleaner. So you can go to propertygeek.net if you want to take a look at that. And if you're on the mailing list, then you'll be notified when the podcast comes back in January. Loads of good stuff lined up for that. And Rob, I believe another podcast is returning to the airwaves as well.
Yeah, I found some free time too. So Property News Radio will be returning. So I know a lot of people like the roundup session of Property News Radio. For those who are new to us and the podcast, Property News Radio is just a weekly session where we cover all the news that's been happening property-wise over the past week. So it just breaks it down into 10 minutes, lets you get what you need and you can move on. So that'll be back in the new year. So late January, you'll see the return of Property News Radio. And I promise it will last a lot longer this time. It's just that we got so busy at RMP, we had to take a pause. I say that, it's like we're easing off next year. As Rob's already alluded to, we've got plenty of big plans to announce, and we will do that very soon in a podcast in a not too distant future. But before we can talk about our grand plans for the property world, let's stay on track, Rob, and go for our property news story. And it seems the government's got grand plans for us and landlords too.
Yeah, good news if you've ever harboured dreams of being an immigration officer, because thanks to the government, you get to do it for free. Yeah, so this is a story. It's been doing the rounds for a long time. We've been aware of it for a long time, but not mentioned it. But I figured we should mention it now because at the start of December, this new scheme came in the West Midlands in certain areas where it's called right to rent. And it's where, as a landlord, you need to check that your tenant has the legal right to rent in the UK, which basically means that you need to check that their immigration status allows them to be here. Why is it up for landlords to do this? I do not know, but it's something that's having to be done there. It's a pilot scheme and then it will come to the rest of the UK at some point. Not a lot to say about it. It's not the most fascinating story. It's just another piece of legislation. But in the show notes, we're linking to the story itself so you can find out what it's all about. Also in the show notes, if you do live in the West Midlands and you want to see if you're in one of the areas that's affected, and if you are, what it is that you need to do, there's actually a really good tool from the Home Office to help you figure out what it is that you need to do. So both those links are going to be in the show notes, which are at thepropertyhub.net/favourite things. But yeah, looks like another piece of legislation, Rob, just what we wanted for Christmas.
Yeah, I can't get enough of it. I love that type of thing. Maybe, maybe not. Let's do it, Rob. This episode is the type of thing we know our listeners love. Let's start off with where we should be right at home with our favourite podcasts of 2014.
Okay, so I'll go first on this one.
So the property podcast, and we're done?
Well, I was going to say property investment tips, as that's our new one this year. But yeah, property podcast as well. I'm a fan, I must say. But there are some other things that have caught my attention as well this year. The first of those is called Philosophize This. And I know that we've been sort of messaging each other back and forth. And every so often I say, Rob, you've got to listen to Philosophize This. And you say, you've got to listen to Hardcore History. And I don't know if either of us has actually got around to listen to the other person's recommendation yet. But Philosophize This is a podcast that I found over the summer. I've been absolutely loving it. All it is it takes you through the history of philosophy, and it does it in a really entertaining way. So starting way back before the ancient Greeks and taking you through to the present day, it explains the major contributions of all these people people like Hobbes and Descartes and people like that who you've probably heard of, but you don't really know what it is that they said. And what I love about this podcast is, first of all, he uses really funny, modern, relevant examples. But the other thing I like is he's just a normal guy. He isn't a philosophy professor of any kind. He's just a normal guy who's doing it in his evenings and weekends because it's what he loves to do. And I think that's the great thing about podcasts. It allows any idiot like us with a microphone to get on and do whatever they want. And some of it's not very good and some of it is great. And this is one which is absolutely great.
No, Rob, I know you haven't listened to Hardcore History yet, unless something's changed in the last week. And no, I still have not listened to Philosophize This. So maybe we should set it in our 2015 goals to swap podcasts.
Yeah.
We'll trade.
New Year's resolution. We'll make it happen.
There we go.
And the other podcast recommendation I've got this is a professional one. This is presented by Alec Baldwin, and it's called Here's the Thing. It's just an interview-based show. Plenty of interview-based shows around, but what I really like about it is that he just interviews people who he admires, which is a huge range of musicians, actors, filmmakers, political figures. And because that he is an admirer of them and he chooses the guests himself, he is a really great interviewer because he asks the questions that you'd want to know if you were a super fan. And he's able to ask good questions because he knows their story in such detail. And as you know, to get a good answer, you need to ask a good question. I've not listened to all the episodes of this, but there are absolutely loads of them. So if there's any kind of cultural figure who you're a fan of, it's worth taking a look through the list, seeing if they're in there and taking a listen to that episode because you're bound to find out something about them which you haven't heard before. So that's called Here's the Thing. And so the link to that will be in the show notes along with everything else.
Right. Sleeves getting rolled up. Here are my podcasts. Okay, let's do it. So an honourable mention has to go to the Tropical MBA. So which was formerly the Lifestyle Business Podcast. This year, they've experimented with their format a little bit, and I think it's really worked. It's a podcast that Rob and I have listened to, well, since I picked up podcasts. It's absolutely fantastic. If you've been a long-time listener, you know we've talked about it multiple times, and one of the special people we've had on for interviews during our business episodes was Dan Andrews, one of the hosts of the Tropical MBA. So if you are interested in business, whether you run one, want to run one, or just have a general interest, those guys are spot on. And they're super entertaining as well. So even if you just want an entertaining podcast, give it a listen because those guys are funny. I really like them. 2 new ones for you. This one, I would say it's probably the first podcast to go viral. Absolutely outstanding. It's called Serial. Now, it's actually made by, I know a podcast you're a fan of, Rob, and I've not listened to yet, This American Life. I know that you've been uber impressed with that podcast in the past, and another one you've recommended to me, and so far I've been silly enough to ignore. So I will listen to that because off the back of this one, it's absolutely fantastic. It is really difficult to describe Serial, so I'm taking this directly off the website. So it's a Serial will follow one story, a true story, over the course of a season. We'll follow the plot and the characters wherever they take us, and we won't know what happens to the end of the story until we get there, and you'll get there with us. Each week, we'll bring the latest chapter, so it's important to listen to in order, starting with episode 1, and you'll need to know how the podcasts work and how to get one. Okay, that's the description, and the first season they've taken on is a murder case from 1999. It was this trial, and I won't give too much away, but this trial of a youth at the time who was accused of murdering his ex-girlfriend and then was convicted, and he's still in prison today. And they're looking at that trial because a lot of people say this guy is the least likely murderer possible. And we don't know what's happening, but each week the story develops. It is so well put together, so well produced. And there's a big team behind it. And I know there's a lot of experience too, because This American Life is a huge podcast in its own right. But Serial has gone massive in a very short space of time, and rightly so, because it's like a movie in your ears. It's absolutely fantastic.
You know what? I've got to say, I actually, as complete coincidence has it, I listened to the first half of the first episode this morning, and I'm hooked already. It's absolutely brilliant from the word go. And This American Life, it takes a story, kind of similar stories, but with a lot of variety, and it explores them over about 20 minutes or so. This one, it's going to do it over however many hours. Each episode seems to be about 45 minutes to an hour long, and there's quite a lot of them. I'm really excited to see where this goes, because I'm already hooked on the story, and it's going to be great to have so much time to explore it in that much detail.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. So really recommend that one. And another one is the Tim Ferriss Show. So Tim Ferriss, famous for his books, in particular The 4-Hour Workweek. He's also done The 4-Hour Body and 4-Hour Chef. Rob and I, are big fans of Tim Ferriss. The way he can deconstruct a problem is really his expertise. He will take a situation and find a way of looking at it more effectively. He's done that with the podcast and with interviews. I love the way he delves into an interview. He seems to interview people a lot differently to how an interviewer would normally approach an interview. He really asks the questions, like Rob's mentioned in the Alec Baldwin podcast, he really asks the questions you want to know, but also asks questions to help you learn. He's done some wonderful interviews. Some really, really A players have been on his podcast. Stand out for me, he did a couple of podcasts with Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is really back on the scene at the moment. He's got a new book coming out over Christmas. And he's done 2 podcasts with Tony Robbins, and they were absolutely fantastic. But I've listened to the vast majority, and I have to say, even when there were people I weren't that interested in, I've actually really enjoyed it, because Tim is very, very good at analysing and asking the right questions and getting the most out of the interviewee. So highly recommend the Tim Ferriss Show too. If you enjoy the books, I know you'll absolutely love that podcast.
He's just so good at curating interesting things, but he's always done it on his blog. He'll introduce you to something you've never really thought about before, and then he'll get you really interested in it because of the enthusiasm he has and the way that he deconstructs it, like you said. And it's exactly the same in the podcast. There's people who I'd never really heard of before. Then I've listened to it and I've gone away fascinated and looking into more of what they do. So yeah, absolutely brilliant for discovering new things. Okay, so at this point, you're probably thinking, right, you've already mentioned about 8 different things and how am I meant to remember all this stuff? Don't worry. Everything is going to be linked to from our show notes, and those show notes are nice and easy to remember as well. So it's thepropertyhub.net/favourite things. So if you're driving or something at the moment, don't worry. You don't have to scribble everything down. Don't worry. It's all there for you. All you need to do is remember thepropertyhub.net/favourite things. Okay, so more favourite things then. Apps is the next up. Lots of apps have featured in our resource of the week. Okay, so I've got a few. I'm trying to remember if these have been in resource of the week or not. I think a couple might and one hasn't. So the first one I've got is Pocket. Pocket is a way of saving interesting things to read later. As you go around the web, you can just click the little Pocket icon that it adds into your browser, and it will then save it. And you can install the app for your iPhone, for your tablet, for any device. And you can go there and it saves it all there for you to read later, even if you're offline. So it's really great if you do what I do. You're meant to be getting on with something, but you spot an interesting link. Rather than taking 10 minutes to read that story there and then, you can just save it to Pocket and read it later. And then once you're in Pocket, it's really easy to share it with people if you liked it as well. There are lots of tools like that around. Rob, do you use Pocket or do you use something else?
I don't use Pocket, Rob. What I do use is an app called Pulse. And Pulse is... It's like your own magazine. You can follow your favourite blogs. You can split them up into categories. It's actually really nice on a tablet. I've got different blogs that I like in different categories. So business, property, sport, whatever you like. You can split it up however you want. And then list your favourite blogs there. And it comes up in a really nice format for you to see. It was actually acquired by LinkedIn. So they must have been doing quite a good job because it was acquired for some money as well. Pulse is really good. I find that a great way to collect my stories. And the other thing I use, if there's articles I'm collecting that might not be in my Pulse app, I'll use Clipper by Evernote. And Evernote's a tool we've talked about a lot. Clipper is a tool, an extension that they have. And if you see an article you like, you can just click the Clipper button, which is an extension. Don't worry, it's all in the show notes. And you can save your articles that way. So I do a similar process. Yours actually probably sounds a bit more streamlined, Rob. But Pulse, similar, and Evernote to do what you do with Pocket, but Pocket sounds really good, so I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, there's just so much good stuff out there. It's really useful to have ways of organising it all. Any of those would do the job. The next one is, well, the one that I use is called Pomodoro Challenge. But if you just go to either the App Store or the Google Play Store and type in Pomodoro, you'll find plenty of these apps that help you work with the Pomodoro method, which, if you haven't heard of it before, is where you shut down everything, you focus, and for 25 minutes, you just do one thing. At the end of that, you take a 5-minute break, and then at the end of the 5 minutes, you do another 25. And the idea is that you can't really focus for more than 25 minutes. So if you try, you'll just end up getting distracted and not working as effectively as you can do. But for that period of time, you really can focus and get things done. So I tend to do this when I've got lots to get done. I just sit down, I set the timer, and I force myself to get things done. So whichever app you choose, you might find it worthwhile if you've got a to-do list that you need to force yourself to blast through, Pomodoro Challenge or something like it. The last app from me is something that has been mentioned on the show before. It's called Duolingo, and this one is for language learning. I've used it for Spanish, but it's in quite a few different languages now. They're adding new ones all the time, and it basically gamifies the whole thing. So the process of learning a language really does become effortless. So you can just put it on your phone or on your tablet, and then every time you've got a spare 5 minutes, you can just go on there and just do a quick lesson. The lessons probably only take about 3 to 5 minutes. And you'll be surprised at how much you retain and how fun it is, because they've got some kind of method that makes things really stick. It's not going to get you all the way to being fluent, but if you're interested in learning a language or just picking up a little bit so you understand something when you go on holiday, Duolingo is the most effortless way I've found of doing it. You could always use it for doing something really bizarre, just like learning 10 different words of Swedish that you can pull out to impress people or something. I don't know, but it is quite fun.
Yeah, Duolingo is well known. It's an app that a lot of people I know have used and talk about very highly. It's one of those apps I've downloaded but never got to use, and I suppose I need the motivation to do it. Maybe if I'm going to a Swedish meatball restaurant in the near future that isn't IKEA, then I can learn those 10 words, Rob, and impress someone that way. So I will re-download it and give it a go.
Don't try it in IKEA. They wouldn't have a clue what you're talking about in there. I don't think there are many Swedes.
No. Okay, so my apps, I think of these, one's new and a few you've heard of before, but I just had to mention these because these are the apps I thought, what can I bring? And I just want to talk about the apps I've loved using this year. The first one I know, Rob and I, such a warm spot in our hearts, Trello. We absolutely love Trello. I don't think there's anything we don't use Trello for. We run everything we do. And if you think about it, tot it up, between us, we do a lot. We've got our own businesses, the business we're together, the podcasts, and wait until we tell you about what we are coming up next year. So we have teams that we work with. We have our own projects that we work on. It's fantastic. And the more we use it, the more things we're finding out and the more ways we're, experimenting with, and we're just doing some really cool things with. And recently, Rob put some really geeky automation together for when we did our recruitment, and Trello was a dream to use. I can't believe it's free. I would happily pay for it, happily. And if Trello, you're listening, I hand on heart, I would. But we just don't need to, because everything we need is free. I'm not going to say any more. I could probably do a podcast on Trello, and maybe one day we will, Trello for property investors. Absolutely brilliant. Check it out. Get into some blogs on how people use Trello, because if you just sort of open it up and put a to-do list in there, you're not really doing it justice. If you ever work on any projects, then Trello is awesome. Rob, I know we could do a podcast on Trello, but do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was going to say that we have kind of done a course on Trello already.
Yeah, we have actually.
So if you go to thepropertyhub.net/courses, you'll find that we've put together a course which is completely free called the Paperless Property System. And it includes a lot about Trello and a lot about Evernote, which Rob mentioned earlier, and some other tools as well, but it shows how we use those to automate areas of our property business. So well worth checking out.
Right. Next up, Slack. 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 Now, Rob and I have talked about HipChat previously, and Slack is something I've started to use a lot more frequently. So I still use HipChat. HipChat for one business, Slack for another. Keeps it easier. What is it? They're instant messaging systems. The reason why I love Slack so much is there's loads of automation in there. You can do some really cool things. So for my calendar reminders, go in there into my own channel. I have pop-ups for that. I get told about the weather the next day automatically every day. In fact, the team does, so we know whether to bring our umbrellas in or not. And we have a little picture of Michael Fish pop up who says, hello guys, and tells us the weather. There's the silly stuff like that, but there's really serious stuff as well. If somebody's coming in for a meeting, it notifies everybody. It's very, very clever, as well as just a normal internal chat. So super, super clever system. If you work in a team, whether it's in a business or you own your own business or you have social groups outside of work and you just want to keep in touch, Slack is very, very good. A free alternative is HipChat, and HipChat's really cool too. That works well. Slack just has a few more bells and whistles and looks a bit prettier. And I think it's the bells and whistles and the design that's definitely drawn me into this one. But either of them would be very useful if you're in a group. Maybe you're a football team or a hockey team or a knitting club, wherever it might be. If you need a way of keeping in touch that's low cost or free, then take a look at one of those two.
You know, what I'll say is if you've got any kind of group of people where you have one of those endless email chains where you just hit reply all and you type back to everyone and this keeps going and going, and you've probably had hundreds of these, consider Slack or HipChat instead. I know lots of people have email threads like that. I always used to. You'll be amazed by how much more efficient Slack will be. Give it a try.
My next app is called Assistant.2. TO, Assistant.2. Now, Rob and I have talked about scheduling software previously, and we still use it for all different things very, very effectively. But one of the versions I like, and we use a few, but one of them I really like is Assistant.2, because it's a scheduling piece of software that you can embed within your email. So I've had this scenario, you're speaking with someone and you're trying to pin down a time for a meeting or a call, whatever it may be, and you're going back and forward, suggesting times. How much time are you wasting? A lot. What Assistant.2 is, within your email, I know this works within Gmail, and I believe it works with other email formats too, is you click a button within your email, the Assistant.2 email, it opens up your calendar, you can click on time slots that you want to suggest, and then populates them within your email, and then the person you send it to can click on one, it'll then book the time in their calendar and your calendar, job done. How much time is that going to save you? Lots. How much does it cost you? Nothing. Absolutely brilliant. I've used it a lot this year. Many of the people, the clients or podcast listeners or hub members that I've spoken to on the phone have had calls with me scheduled this way, because I know people are busy and I'm busy and we're back and forth with times. This has saved so much time. It's been brilliant.
Yeah, I've used it as well. It is brilliant because it's so simple. And everyone hates those endless chains of back and forth. Can you do this time? No. Can you do this time? No. Everyone hates it. You'll be everyone's hero if you use Assistant.2. And I bet, Rob, a good proportion of those who you've used it with have gone on to use it with people as well. Once you realise what an easy alternative it is, you're just never going to stop using it.
No, it's absolutely brilliant. And free. Unbelievable. So many of these apps and resources we're talking about are free. So it's a great world we live in. Next up, my final app. I've not mentioned this one before. I'm pretty sure I haven't. It's an email client service for your phone or tablet, and it's called Mailbox. Why not just use the apps that you get on your phones already? Because Mailbox is better. Trust me. I heard about Mailbox and I was slightly reluctant. I was like, well, the Gmail app works just fine for me. It's pretty enough. It works. And it was fine. But Mailbox is really, really clever. It helps you get to inbox 0 really quickly. You swipe one way to say you've read the email or you're finished with it. You swipe the other and you can set a time for when you want the email. So let's say an email comes in and you want to deal with it on Monday. Just a flick of your finger, you can reset it to bounce back to you on the Monday. It's that simple. It helps you get your inbox down to 0 really quickly and effectively. It's really, really effective. Where you just leave emails in your inbox because you have to deal with it in a few days' time, but not now. So you kind of just leave it there. Or you go to file it and you don't remember to go back to it. Mailbox gets rid of that. It's very, very clever. Very, very simple. I believe it's free. It certainly was when I downloaded it. Super effective, super simple. And it's owned by Dropbox, another resource that we've talked about before.
Interesting. Okay, I might give it a go. I'd resisted because I'm very proud of my email efficiency and I've inbox 0 most of the time. And so I thought, I don't need that. But it does sound good. So I think I might be giving that a go. Okay, this is on track to be one of our longest podcasts ever because we've got so much to recommend. And I'm just looking at what's coming up next, which is books. And I've read a lot this year, actually. I've done quite a good job of reading books rather than just reading a lot of articles, which is what I always used to do. And I've read loads of good stuff this year, so I won't talk about them all now. They'll all be in the show notes, but I'll just pull out a few interesting ones. One which I absolutely recommend if you're interested in starting a business of any kind is called The 7-Day Startup, and it's by Dan Norris. Dan Norris is a great guy. You might be familiar with him if you listen to the Tropical MBA podcast, because he gets mentioned on there every so often. But the point of his book is that it's so easy to, when you're starting a business, put months and months and months into it, worrying about every last detail, and then you launch it and you realize that no one cares and your business just is never going to work. The great thing with his method, he says you should never start a business that you can't get off the ground in 7 days. And he tells you exactly how to do it. So that's well worth a read if you've got any desire to start a new business. It will really save you a huge amount of time.
And his blog is excellent too. Really puts the effort into his blogs. Very, very good content.
Yes, absolutely. Another one that I've read that I found really inspirational, actually, is a book called Spartan Up, and it's by Joe DeSena. And I haven't found it inspirational enough to actually do what it is that he spends the whole book talking about, is that he arranges these really hardcore obstacle races called the Spartan Race, and they just sound absolutely insane. And this book, it's like a combination of his story, which is absolutely inspirational in itself, and also why he believes that this Spartan race is so beneficial for people, not just physically, but also in terms of motivation and self-esteem and all sort of things. Yes, I've read the book and I have not done a Spartan race, and I'm put to shame by our lettings manager at Yellow, who every weekend seems to be doing some kind of insane challenge, but I haven't done any of that. But it is a really inspirational book. And in fact, I've just remembered, Rob, that I first heard about Joe on the Tim Ferriss show. So it just goes to show how Tim's good at getting you interested in stuff that you'd never really thought about before.
Yeah, I've not read that one myself, so I'll have to give that a go. Although my backlog of books is huge at the moment. It's so much good stuff out there, it's hard to know where to start.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm only going to recommend one more for fear of overloading you even more, but it's called The Everything Store, and it's by Brad Stone, and it's the unofficial story of Amazon.com. I found this really interesting because it's something that, we must order from Amazon at least every week. More so, I imagine. We just buy pretty much everything on Amazon now. And that's not by accident. That's happened because Jeff Bezos is a very clever man and he's done some extraordinary things to make Amazon into the force it is. So I definitely recommend that to get a behind the scenes look. I can't not mention that I've put out 2 books this year as well, and they'll both be linked to in the show notes. I hesitate to talk about them in the same breath as these other great books that I've spoken about, but they'll be in the show notes all the same.
No, they're very good books. I've read them, so they deserve to be there too, Rob. Some other books that deserve to be there too. This is not one for a weekend. My first recommendation is called The History of the Third Reich. I recommend that you try this on audiobook, because to give you an idea of the size of the book, it's 57 hours long in audiobook version. Now, please don't write it off, because The History of the Third Reich, yeah, as it sounds, it's the history of the rise and fall of the Nazi Party, the history of Hitler. Absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure, I've not read it, but I did the audiobook version of this. In the audiobook version, it comes across absolutely brilliant. It's so good. If you have the slightest interest in history, I promise you'll love this book. And if you're going to use, a free book on Audible, because I know they do this thing where you can get your first book free. Well, if you sign up for one book and then cancel, ruining Audible here, but you don't have to pay for anything. Make sure your one book's this if you like value for money, because they're 57 hours long. It's going to take you a while to get through it. Absolutely brilliant. It's by William Shirer. I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Brilliant book. It's an oldie, but a goodie. It took me the year to finish it. I felt like I'd completed a marathon at the end, and a little emotional that it ended as well. I mean, I'm glad Hitler ended, but the book, it was absolutely brilliant. And you think you know quite a bit about a subject. I'm interested in history, and Second World War is something I've read about previously. This guy goes into so much detail that you feel like you're an expert by the end of it. So highly recommend it. I know, Rob, I've given you a nudge on that one a few times too. But you've got hardcore history to go through first. So that's really good.
I'm just so daunted by the length of that, but I know that's no excuse. I don't know. I will get around to it. And if we ever do a pub quiz together, I really hope there are lots of questions about the Nazi Party, because you're going to clean up.
I should do. I'm going to be found out pretty quickly if I don't. Right. So next up, Rob, I think you recommended this one to me, and I'm a fan of some of his other work. Some of his other books are really good. So maybe follow the author. Michael Lewis is the author, but his recent book, Flash Boys, another instant classic. It's a great book, and it's about Wall Street, and he's covered lots of money subjects before, and particularly manipulation of money markets in different forms. And again, this book is brilliant. It's about how they're called flash traders and how they've had an inside advantage over the general market for years and got away with it. Effectively, they invest in the stock market and win 100% of the time. How? Well, I'll let the book explain, but it sounds unfair, probably because it is. Michael Lewis certainly thinks so. And it's unbelievable that they get away with it. Absolutely unbelievable. But the book's great. Really, really good book. Check it out and I think you'll enjoy it. And finally, just a quick mention to a business book that Rob and I know have got a lot of value out this year is Rockefeller Habits. Very, very good book. If you own or run a business or have an interest in business, that book by Vern Harnish is very, very good. So check that one out too.
Yeah, brilliant book. Love that one. I reread that this year, actually. Fantastic. Okay, so that's plenty of books for you. Again, the show notes where all of these are linked to is at thepropertyhub.net/favourite things. This is getting long, so I'm just going to have to give a very quick shout out to a few blogs and websites which are in my favourite things this year. In a sentence, or as close as a word to I can get, I suppose, Raptitude.com, contemporary philosophy, MrMoneyMoustache.com, badass personal finance, waitbutwhy.com, really fascinating things that you had no idea you were fascinated by. That's all I'm going to say. It's all in the show notes, and just go and have a click around and make sure you've installed Pocket or something like that first, because you're going to have a lot to follow up on.
Yeah, I'm not going to even name any websites because that we've given so much already. But what I will mention is just a random other one. Something I've got a lot of value out of this year is Netflix. It's a TV service. So you might be going, oh, TV, that's not good. But actually, I think the TV, if used in the right way, is absolutely fantastic for your learning and downtime. My bugbear with general TV is people turn it on, and I used to do this, and just watch rubbish. You know, you turn it on and whatever's on, you just... You make do and you watch it. What I love about Netflix is you can watch high quality programming when you want, where you want, because you can take it with you on your mobile devices. But the really good quality documentaries, there's some films on there, not that many, but really good drama series is on there as well. So you can watch really, really high quality TV. If you're into crime stuff, there's loads of that there, or documentaries, and not have to put up with adverts or rubbishy programs while you're waiting for a good program to come on. I've pretty much given up on normal TV. Other than sport, I've pretty much given up on normal TV now. I just use Amazon Prime, which is an alternative, but not quite as good. And Netflix, I've got them both, but you don't have to get them both. If you're going to get one, Netflix would be the one to go for. And I think it's £6 a month. It's unbelievable value. I think it's a steal at £6 a month. I do not have any shares in Netflix. I know I sound passionate about this and a few other things I've talked about today. But honestly, the reason why they're in this episode is because these are things I've really enjoyed using this year. So if you haven't taken a look at Netflix yet, give it a try. It's a lot cheaper than Sky.
Yeah, it is. And I think if there's one thing to take away from everything that we've talked about in this show, it's that there is a lot of amazing stuff out there in the realms of any kind of entertainment and education you can imagine, whether that's TV, websites, books, podcasts, and software as well. There's so much out there that I think it's really worth taking the time to curate the best experience you can have for yourself. So rather than just sticking on BBC One and seeing what someone else has decided you should watch on a Saturday night, put on Netflix and choose for yourself, and use our recommendations and go from there and branch out and find other things you love as well. But there's so much amazing stuff. There's really no reason to be watching something that you don't absolutely love at any time, because there's just so much out there.
Here. That's our favourite things of 2014. And as you heard, there's a lot of things we like. As Rob said, go and pick your way through these things and find out what works for you. Some of these things can have a really big impact on your life in a good way. You know, it's not being too dramatic. There's some really good stuff out there. So I hope you found this useful. We've certainly enjoyed putting this list together. And I know from the feedback we get, people enjoy these types of episodes. So we promise to do at least one a year. I'll give you that. We promise to do another one next year. So if you've enjoyed this episode, or even better, if you've got a suggestion on an app or a tool or a book or a website that you've watched, listened to, read this year, go to the show notes, thepropertyhub.net/favourite things, and leave a comment and let us know what you found really valuable this year. Give us your list. I'd love to read other people's lists, because Rob and I are still learning from each other on things we can use and utilise. So it'd be great to get everyone else's perspective on what things you found useful this year. Or if you've used some of the apps, books, podcasts that we've mentioned, then let us know. What did you think of them? Did you enjoy them too? Go to thepropertyhub.net/favourite things. And you know what else is our favourite things, Rob?
Oh, yes. Is it iTunes reviews by any chance?
It is iTunes reviews.
How did I know?
We'll just do one today because it's been a long episode. But a big thank you to Burbage Wiseman. Sorry if I've got your name wrong there. Loving recent episodes. I really enjoyed the maximising rent episode. I like the emphasis on being about right with tenants and not digging your heels in for a apparent quick buck that in the long term costs you time and money. I think you got the idea across of giving a good product for a fair price, which is a great adage for business and being reasonable and ethical. Many thanks for a great series of podcasts. 5 stars. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Absolutely love those. If you do want to leave us a review, we would love it. It's the best Christmas present you could get us. You can find that. You can find the link to do so in the show notes as well. And speaking of Christmas, Rob, next Thursday, Christmas Day, no podcast, surely?
No, Rob. We're hardcore. We're doing it. Yep, that's right. Forget the Queen's speech. The property podcast will still go out next Thursday. Get the family around your mobile device, put it on speakerphone. Rob and I will be doing 2014, our personal reflections. You know, what's the Queen got on us? Nothing. So you can listen to the Queen's reflections, which probably mentions something about war, or ours. And I promise, no war.
That's a big promise. No, that's all we can guarantee, no war. But the Queen doesn't record live on Christmas Day, so I don't think we have to either. But it will be coming out on Christmas Day. So that is coming up next week. Until then, if you are interested in coming along on the 4th of January to our London meetup, do get over to thepropertyhub.net/meetup to see if any tickets are still available. We would love to see you there if you can possibly make it along. So that is us done until Christmas Day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.